It's great to be here. That's a very bright light, so I might squint a little bit, just so you know. I'm also going to use something called Slido. Has anyone heard of Slido? Anyone? It's a way that you can respond during the talk. So I have some questions that I'd love for you to respond to and some survey things. So if you just go to slido.com, and then you can put in this event as hashtag #GoViralAgile, then at certain times I'll bring up a poll. So I'll try it actually right now. Let's see if it's gonna work. Oh, see, there it is. So you could actually just respond to this. Oh, I like that. So my question is, what is Agile? And I put the Russian in, so please forgive me if the translation's not exact, because I had to use Google Translator. So I'd love to see anybody put in something like, what is Agile? Just to get a sense of what people think Agile is. New philosophy for work, awesome. Approach to organizing team and project management, but I don't understand it in practice. Well, hopefully you'll get a little bit more from that by the end of this talk. Okay, so this is awesome. What I really wanted to do was actually get you to start thinking about some of the definitions. So you can keep putting things in, but I'll move along right now. I'll stop the poll. Let's look at some definitions. So this definition I got, Alan Hullab is a famous trainer in the United States, and he says that Agile is really about the ability to welcome and act on new and changing business requirements, especially when those requirements emerge, when the work is in progress, and that to do this, you need an empowered workforce that's autonomous. What do you think about that? How do you think that that would happen here in Kazakhstan? Just think about that. All right, then I also wanted to show just the definition from the Merriam's dictionary on what Agile is and see if that lines up. Marked by ready ability to move with quick and easy grace, an agile dancer, having a quick and resourceful and adaptable character like an agile mind. All right, so let's do one more poll. And now I'd like you to see what is your definition of innovation? Does anyone define innovation? Oh, excellent. A new approach to do things, new and useful. New way of solving problems. Something new to work with. Okay, great. So I found this cute picture. I like this. I would wear this t-shirt. The introduction of something new, a new idea, method, or device. Okay, so far, I think we're all kind of on the same page about what this is. So let's talk a minute, because there seems to be this thing about Agile versus Waterfall. And just a show of hands, how many of you would say you're working in an Agile way now? Anybody? How many people think you're working in a Waterfall way? Okay, let's check out. I'm just going to check out. I just want to walk through quickly the difference between Waterfall and Agile. So in Waterfall, the whole idea is that we would do all the planning up front. And the thought, I guess, was that maybe that would decrease the risk, because we'd get every single thing planned out in the greatest detail, and then all we would have to do is execute on it. So we'd do all our design, but then we would do all our coding, and then we would do all our testing, and then we would deliver value. And that is the predominant way that people were working in the United States, for sure, through the 60s and 70s and 80s into the 90s. Except it didn't decrease the risk, because the problem was we did all the testing at the end right before we were going to release. And because we did that, we found a lot of problems. So we didn't always release when we thought we would. And for me, there was even one greater problem. We couldn't benefit from any of the things that we learned along the way. So in about the 90s, people in software started getting really kind of frustrated with this approach. And they started coming up with a whole bunch of other approaches, lightweight ways of working in an Agile way. So in Agile, the major difference is that rather than do a big bang approach, we look at how we can divide the work so that we can do all of those things. We can do some planning, and we can design, and we can build something, and we can release it. We can give value to our customer very quickly. And then we can do the whole process again. It's an iterative, incremental way of developing things. And I say things because it started in software, but it really could be used. The methods can be used for building any complex product or solving complex problems. So here's my question. This seems pretty simple to me. Like, the difference between Waterfall and Agile seems pretty simple, but there's a huge amount of confusion about this. And I'm kind of curious, like, why is there so much confusion? When I started to put together this talk, I started to think, why are people so confused about what Agile is, or why do they think it's a practice when it's not? So here's my take on some of this. I think we have to start with what is Agile. So has anyone heard of this Manifesto for Agile Software Development? Wave. I see like 3 people. This is excellent. I think some of the confusion came because Agile didn't even exist as a philosophy around software development until 2001. But in the 90s, people started inventing lightweight frameworks to build software in an iterative and incremental way. And then they all got together and decided, well, what could we call of this? What matches? What could kind of be an umbrella for all of it? And they came up with Agile. So now I realize, like, I talk to people all the time and they say, oh, Scrum is Agile. I'm like, well, no, actually, no. Scrum's a way of working in an Agile way, but it's not what Agile is. So what Agile really refers to is this manifesto. And it's written completely from the perspective of software, which I don't necessarily agree with, but that's the way it is. And the point of it is that, and you have to think of it from the time they were writing it, is we're uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. Through this work, we have come to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. That probably is the most important thing in the whole manifesto. And I talk to people all the time who think, well, that's weird, we do that. I'm like, but that wasn't necessarily the case in 1975. And I can remember working in, like, when I was a software developer after college and working on giant projects. And at the end of it, we'd have really beautifully bound 300-page documentation. And our software would be buggy and not really work so well. So we would do things like that, and that was the process, so we followed it. Or you would ask for something practical and sensible, and someone would say, well, we can't do that because you have to fill out this form and that form, and then we have to get it signed off by this person in this other office. It just wasn't very practical. And we did a lot of writing rather than talking to each other. But anybody who's building software or solving complex problems knows that the best way to do it is to collaborate with people and actually talk to them. And any written requirement that I get is never going to be half as good as having a 5-minute conversation with someone about what they want. So that's what this is really about. It's really about, like, getting practical. Now, people misinterpret this all the time, and they say, oh, then we don't need to use any tools, or we don't need to tell anybody when we think we'll be done with anything, or we don't need to do any documentation. None of that is true. That's a weird, people interpret things weird because we interpret things because that's what we do. So I encourage you, if you're curious, this Agile Manifesto, you can get it in Russian. And that's really what Agile is. It's a series of 4 values and 12 principles. And then Agile then is this umbrella. And some of you might recognize Scrum, XP, FDD, feature-driven development. These are the tools that people came up with, as frameworks for actually working in an iterative and incremental way, like the practices. So now people equate Agile with these tools, and then they say, oh, Agile doesn't work because people don't implement the tools well. Well, you can't really blame a tool. Like, if you cut yourself with a knife, you wouldn't say it was the knife's fault, right? The knife is a tool. All of these practices are just tools. And how we implement them gives us a pretty good indication of the results that we're going to get. So that's why I guess I'm a Scrum trainer, so I can help people implement in a way that will work for them. All right, so maybe we also need to think, is it always appropriate to use Agile? I don't know. I like this diagram. It's called the Stacy diagram. And essentially, it helps us to figure out when it's useful. So on the y-axis, we have what to deliver. And we can ask ourselves, are we clear what to deliver? How clear is our vision? Or do we just know that we need to deliver something? And if we're unclear, then we're going into the realm of the complex. If we're totally clear, then with a couple more questions, we might figure out we don't need a whole Agile approach. The same with how to deliver it. Do we know what we're going to use? Whether we're doing software development or whether we're making a marketing campaign, do we know exactly the tools? Do we have them? If we're really clear about what we're going to build and how we're going to build it, we don't necessarily need an Agile approach. We can just do it, right? There's things that are defined. I call that defined work. We know what it is and how to do it. Agile's really good when we don't, when there's some question about it, and we live in a complex world. Now, the world seems to be getting more complex, from my point of view anyway. We are getting bigger things, more complex problems. So Agile is really well suited to anything that's really complex. So I think that's the first thing I tell people to do. Figure out if you really need this thing. Is it, because it's actually pretty difficult. It's simple but hard to do. So if you don't need it, don't waste your time. So if we need it, let's say we need it, we decide, okay, yeah, we're going to use an Agile approach, and we're going to actually start it, or we might be in the middle of it. There's 3 aspects that we got to deal with. Agile is the culture, right? We all live in culture. There's no way around it. It is the water in the fish tank, right? It just is. And we operate in culture. So we have to think about, how do we change the culture? If we are living in a command and control, hierarchical culture, and we want to do Agile, we're going to have some issues unless we start changing the culture, right? So that's one. Then we can look at as Agile as a practice. All those practices that were on the umbrella slide, like, what are we going to use? Are we going to use Scrum? I put this picture in here. This is a picture of a scrum in rugby. That's the silly place that Scrum got its name, because someone thought that when they looked at a really high-producing software team, it looked so chaotic like a Scrum, but everybody's doing something. So that's Scrum, in case you didn't know. So those are the practices, and how do we implement those practices effectively? The third one is Agile as structure. So if in corporations, in work, we have structures. We have the way our workforce is structured. Are we in teams? Are we in cross-functional teams? Are we in, QA versus development? If we're in sales, does each salesperson have their own siloed work area that they work in, or do we work together? What's our HR like? All of these things are the structures of our company, and we have to consider them if we want Agile to really work. So there's 3 things that we would need to do to have a shot at getting Agile to be effective, or to getting a practice implemented. One is we need to have a product backlog. Now, product backlogs are very simple, and this is where it gets a little tricky. They are an ordered list of all the work we want done. That means there's only one thing at the top, and we actually have to figure out the order. And that's really hard. So mostly people just put the whole thing in and go, well, it doesn't matter. I need all of it by X date, which sounds a lot like Waterfall, doesn't it? So we need this ordered product backlog, and we need things in that to be refined so that people can work on them. We need cross-functional, self-organizing teams. Cross-functional so that we can deliver something of value to the customer. Because if we can't, well, we're not going to get the feedback. We've not broken it down. We're not decreasing the risk. So I love this. So this, you can say that in your conference you saw a cute cat slide. Is that a thing here in Kazakhstan? Are cat slides, like cat videos and slides? It's a big thing in the United States. You have to like watch kitty videos. They help you stay undepressed. And then the last thing is we need to deliver value, some value, in a timely fashion. And this is actually working tested product because it helps us decrease our risk. And again, you can kind of map this on whether it's software or whether it's something else. People are using this stuff to build houses. So we can do it. It just requires a little bit of tweaking. All right, so these are the things we need. Now, who's heard of Dan Pink? Anyone? Dan Pink, he wrote a book called Drive about what motivates us. Yeah? So he says that, and it was interesting, I watched the video, and he said they did a lot of research and figured out that, shockingly, monetary incentives for people doing thought work were de-incentivizing. Like, they didn't respond just because we go like, okay, do this faster and you'll get more money. They actually went slower. They got worse results. It worked okay for very manual, repetitive work, but not for anything that required thought. So he delved into this, and what he found that people really need to be engaged and motivated is they need autonomy, they need a sense of purpose, and they need to be able to experience mastery. So I want you just to try that hat on for yourselves. What do you need to be engaged? Do you need these things? What has you be the most engaged and productive and happy and satisfied? I'll let you think about that. Hopefully you'll talk about that with each other. So it's interesting because if I go back and I look at those three things, I'm like, wow, well, a product backlog would give people purpose. Oh, here's what we need to build. Okay, there's some purpose there. The self-organizing teams, where people get to decide how much work and how they're going to do it and who's going to do what, give people a sense of autonomy. And delivering value, like in a short amount of time, actually helps people deliver mastery. So this whole idea of these agile practices works to have people be engaged. And that's really distinct from a position where I'm just like a cog in the wheel and I'm just waiting for some other person to tell me exactly what to do, which is sort of our modern management, pre-Agile. So now I'm going to say something, because I live in America and I go to work with Scrum all the time, and I talk to people about Agile, people who've been doing it, big companies who spent a lot of money on it, and you know what? A lot of them are failing. The implementations are not taking hold. And you have to ask yourself, well, we know all of this, and there's research, and there's TED Talks, and there's videos, and there's books, and all of that. And it's not seeming to make the difference. So you have to ask yourself, well, why not? What stops us believing in all that stuff? What stops us from acting on all of that? So here's my take on it. Fear of failure. Hands down, totally simple, fear of failure. Nobody wants to fail. Okay, but think about this. We have an inspect and adapt process in the Agile world, right? We're going to work in small chunks. We're going to get feedback often. We're going to modify what we do based on what we find. That means that we're going to fail a lot. And if we don't deal with failing, well, it's no surprise that this isn't going very well. So how do we deal with failure? I want you to think about a time, or let's just talk about what failure does to us, right? When we think we're going to fail or we've failed, like physically, I think we get a little, we cringe a little bit. So let's talk about the last time. I want you to everyone think about the last time you failed. Now, this doesn't have to be the massive life-ending failure. This could be something as simple as like, oh yeah, I told my spouse I'd bring home, ice cream for dessert, and I didn't do it, and now they're a little annoyed with me. We don't want to fail ever. So, or it could be, I said I would finish something at work and I didn't. Or I thought that I did this thing and it didn't work the way I wanted it to. So, can everyone think of the last time you had one of these little failures? All right, raise your hand when you have one. All right, if you really can't think of one, you can use that as your failure. Okay, that's easy. All right, I have one, and I'll tell you about it. So we're going to start to deal with our fear of failure. I think, I'm sure in the brain, there's some sort of, neurons that fire when we fail and we have a predictable response. When I really think about failing, I kind of go inward. I literally kind of go like, oh, and I get this kind of like everything gets a little pinched and I kind of want to hide. I don't want anybody to know about my failures because it will make me look bad. And if I think about people in corporations, this is risky, right? This whole thing with Agile seems risky. There's lots of people who go, well, I'm good now in the status quo. I have a good job. I make good money. If this fails, I might not have that job. Wow, that's pretty intense. So if we don't really transform this whole idea of failure and how we do it, I don't know that we're ever really going to get that far with Agile. Like we've gotten far, like we've gotten the benefit of incremental development. You get about 10, 15% better than just doing pure waterfall. But those results, that scrum book that says twice the work in half the time, you don't get there from incremental work. You get there because you have self-organizing teams who are willing to fail so that they can actually find better ways of doing things and they have autonomy and they can deliver. They collaborate. But if you're so afraid to fail, then collaboration's even hard because someone might know that you don't know everything and then you'll look like an idiot. So, all right, so I have a little method that I learned from a friend of mine, and it's called the failure bow. So I want to teach it to you, all right? And this is partly so that we actually start to talk about our failures. So I'm going to tell you about a failure that I just had when I was in Astana. I had done an all-day training, and I was with one of my friends in the beach mall. There's this big tent mall in Astana, and there's a beach at the top of it. I don't know if you've heard of this. It seems very famous. I mean, I grew up at the beach, so I really wanted to see the beach in the mall. So I come off the elevator, and I'm looking around like a 5-year-old, right? So many things to see. And what I don't see is there's two steps right in front of me. So you can imagine what happens. I miss the first step, and then I'm like, oh, quick, I think I might be going down. And then I miss the second step. Now, how I fall is like I've done the Superman pose, right? Literally, it's like, and I am now all over the floor, face down, like out of breath. And now people are all around me and asking me if I'm okay. And here's what I'm thinking. Oh my God. Well, first I'm like, okay, did I break anything? No, that's good. I have to do a training. And then I'm thinking, oh my God, the people are never going to invite me back to Kazakhstan because I'm such a loser that I fell in the mall and they're going to be worried about me. I mean, you can imagine the little voice in my head, right? You guys have the little voice? Everyone has a little voice. Theoretically, on a good day, the voice tells us that it's trying to protect us. And maybe it is, but its way of doing it is just so tragic, right? That it makes us feel like an idiot most of the time. So I'm sharing that with you so that, like, I'm not dead, right? I'm still here. You didn't all get up en masse and leave my talk. You're still sitting with me. And I think that that's the key, is for us to actually talk about when we fail. But there's a physical thing that we can do to actually start to train our brains to go the other way. So I want you now, I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to have you stand up and do it. So the failure bow is actually all about changing the direction. So if I'm in and I'm like this, then instead, I'm going to do this. So I'm going to kind of go up. And as I go up, I'm going to actually say something like, I failed, and it's okay. Because the part about failing is that we learn from it. That's the part. In all of this Agile development, failure isn't bad because it's how we learn. The products get better because we made mistakes and we learned from them and we saw better ways. We actually can't get better if we're not failing. All right, so everybody stand up. All right. All right, and then on 3, I want you to, you're going to do your bow, and I want you to say out loud what, like, I failed at blah, blah, blah. And just be loud and proud, okay? So ready? On 3. 1, 2, 3. All right. Now, here's where I do this. I teach this to people in my class. You can sit down now. I teach this to people in my class. And, oh, we missed one key part. When you do the failure bow, everyone has to clap for you. So why don't you let's just all clap for each other. So I teach this to people in my classes. I have people doing this in corporations so that we can get less significant about failure because it is part of life. We won't actually succeed if we're not willing to fail. All right, so I wanted you to have that. If we really can get beyond this, then we can actually change the way we lead people. We can do things like intent-based leadership, which rather than telling everybody what to do, we simply state the goal and have people figure it out. We can do mutual learning where we create ourselves as learning organizations. And we can really be servant leaders in service of great product and in service of our people being really happy. So why? I know I'm going to wrap it up soon, but why? You know, doing Agile practices like Scrum, I'm going to do a session at 3 o'clock. They are not for the faint of heart. This is not like what you do because you want to keep the status quo. You're going to learn to fail. You're going to collaborate. You're going to talk to people and talk about things you never thought you would. It's risky. So why do it? My take. I do it because I want to thrive. I don't think that there's people who are very, they're doomsday people. They think if you don't do this, your company's going to die. I don't even think that. I think Kazakhstan's going to be just fine, right? I think we can be just fine by surviving, or we can really be extraordinary and thrive. And for me, everything that I do in Agile and all the people that are really taking it on, they actually want to have something different than they have now. So I'm going to leave you with a question. What's your why for Agile? And I have one more thing I'd like you to put up just to see what we can come up with, which is another question. Here we go. So the one characteristic you need to work effectively in an Agile way, put a word up and it's going to form a word cloud. So if everyone could do it, it would be great. We'll get an awesome word cloud on the screen. All right, it's really been my pleasure to talk to you about my experience in Agile, and I hope that I see you using the failure bow. Teach it to your children. They don't actually have a problem with failure. You notice that, right? When you're 5, if the sandcastle tumbles over, like I grew up on the beach, you just build a new one, right? There's not a lot of shame. We deal with that. So I hope I see you at 3 o'clock, and please find me if you have any questions about Agile. I'm going to be wandering around, and thank you so much for your attention.